So you're going to get your CDL and you're going to go to the place and they're going to read this piece of paper to you and tell you what type of inspection you have to do. You might only have to do one side, you might have to only do the engine, but in either case I'm going to show you how to do the entire inspection on its whole. Two things you should know right away are your buzzwords, your sayings that you need to repeat more as often as you can. The first is bent, broken, or cracked, and the second is properly mounted and secure. The more you can say that, the better. Okay, let's get started. The first thing you're gonna do is come back here and you're gonna look at three things, the three L's: the lights, the liquids, and the level. So I'm gonna look at the lights and make sure all of the lights are properly mounted and secure and that none of them are bent, broken, and cracked. I'm going to make sure that the bus is level, because if it's not, that means there's something wrong with the axles or the suspension. And then I'm going to see if there are any fluids under the vehicle, because obviously it would be really bad if something is leaking. So now that that's done, we're going to come up, do a little more inspection. We're going to make sure that everything on the front is properly mounted and secure, including the license plate, the bumper, the hood, the lights, everything. Okay, congratulations, that's the first part. Now we're going to do the engine part. So you're gonna undo the latches and pull down the engine. Okay, we're gonna start on this side of the vehicle. Okay, on this side of the vehicle, what you're primarily looking for is fluids. So for example, right here we have our transmission fluid. Because this has a sight glass, we can say that this is within normal operating conditions and that it is properly mounted and secure. The container doesn't appear to be bent, broken, or cracked. You can look here, this is the steering fluid because it's on the steering bore. And we would normally open this and insert a dipstick to make sure it is in safe operating range. Additionally, we would make sure that this is not bent, broken, or cracked. It's properly mounted and secure. And with all of these, we don't want any leaking fluids because there's fluids. This guy is the coolant or the reservoir. This one also has a sight glass, so you want to make sure it's in safe operating range. And one important thing is that you're never going to open this when the engine is hot. It would likely burn you and it'd be really bad. So don't do that. Make sure you tell them you know not to do that. And windshield wiper fluid here, we can see the windshield wiper fluid, so we know it's in safe operating range. And again, none of this is bent, broken, or cracked. It is all properly mounted and secured. So if we're going to check the oil level, you see this yellow dipstick right here. This is for the oil level. The way that you check a dipstick, and you have to tell them, is you pull out the dipstick, wipe it off, insert it, pull it back out, and make sure it's in safe operating range. So I'm not going to do the full thing, but if you look here, safe operating range is around these dots right here. So you want to make sure oil is at that level. Okay, we're going to reinsert the dipstick. Additionally, if you want to check the transmission fluid, this one, you would use this red dipstick that's in the back over there. Okay, so now we're going to go to the other side of the engine. Okay, on this side, we're going to be checking a few things. One of those being, this is the battery. Since it's all electrical, we want to make sure that none of this rubber shows signs of burning. That would be really bad. It'd be like melted through. So we note that the battery is properly mounted and secure. Nothing appears bent, broken, or cracked. If you look down here, those things that have all the, I don't know, holes in them, that's an alternator. You can see the alternator is attached to the belt. We want to make sure that that belt has no more than 3/4 inch of play in the middle. So we would just push down on it. You don't actually have to do it, but explain what you would do. The alternator is belt driven, so that's important that you point that out. Additionally, there are a couple other belts. Let me check. So we have I'll go back. But in this case, right, obviously the alternator belt is there. You have the air compressor belt that is also in that set of belts. And then on the other side, we have our other two belts. This is all on the driver's handbook, so that's important. Okay, let's go back to the other side. All right, in this case, we also need to talk about the water pump belt and the power steering, this whole mechanism. So water pump is somewhere back there. You don't actually have to say it, but just say it's back there and that it is belt driven, and you would check the play on that belt as well. You don't have to point it out, just say what you would check for. This, we're gonna go back to all this steering stuff. So the steering typically has a belt, but in this case it's gear driven. So just say steering doesn't have a belt, it's gear driven. Okay, so now looking at the steering, this back here is the steering box. It's kind of hard to see, but you want to make sure that the steering box is properly mounted and secure and that it's not leaking. There are no it's not bent, broken, or cracked, including these little cotter keys and bolts over here. You want to make sure that those aren't corroded in any way. Going down, you see this long thing right here. This is called the steering linkage because it goes from the steering box to the front axle. You want to make sure that that is not bent, broken, or cracked, properly mounted, secure, and it's not corroded in any way. Going down a little bit, we have more. We have the steering linkage that goes down here to the front axle. You can see this is the front axle. Things you're going to be checking for right here. So example, this looks a little corroded. In my inspection, I just told them I would likely report that to maintenance because that's what you do. You're looking, this front thing right here that goes perpendicular to this beam, that is your front axle. You're looking at to make sure that that is bent, broken, or cracked. It's not, it's properly mounted and secure. These two things right here, those are called leaf springs. You're making sure that those leaf springs are exactly on top of each other, that they're properly mounted and secure, they're not bent, broken, or cracked. And these are U-bolts. You're making sure that those U-bolts are properly mounted and secure, they're not bent, broken, or cracked. Okay, let's talk a little bit about brakes, and this is the hardest part for me, so definitely rely on your chapter 11 because I'm not so good at the brake stuff. But back here is your brake, your box. You're gonna make sure that that's not leaking and that it is properly mounted and secure, not bent, broken, or cracked. You have brake drums back here. You wanna make sure that your brake drums are properly mounted and secure, they're not bent, broken, or cracked. And what's important for those drums is that there's no oil or fluid on them because that would obviously hinder the ability to brake. But later in the back we have what's called duals, which are two tires next to each other. So there are a lot of things we can't check up here, but that we'll have to check back there. So just read through the handbook and make sure that you check all of that stuff. On the outside, if we're just going to check this tire, because this is a drive tire, it's on the front, the tread has to be 4/32 of an inch. In the back, it only has to be 2/32 of an inch. 4/32 is basically like if you put a quarter and you put the head down. If you can see the head, then the tread is good. If you can't, then it's too low. That's like the rule of thumb. Also with the tires, in one of these holes somewhere around it, you're going to be able to feel, in this case it's right here, where you would check the air pressure. So you just say I would check the air pressure and make sure that's good. And then we would pop these off using just like a flathead screwdriver and make sure that the rim was properly mounted and secure, it wasn't bent, broken, or cracked, and that most important for rim, it had no illegal welds. So that's a big thing for rims. And then you'd be able to see some of the brake pads in there along with the brake drums. So that's just another thing you check. Final thing on this side, you can see this column right here that connects the top of the vehicle. This thing right here, so that is your, that's your hydraulic, what's it called? Hydraulic, oh shoot, I forgot what it's called.
Hydraulic something.
Yeah, hydraulic something. Shock absorber, duh. And that, since it has hydraulic fluids, you want to make sure that it's not leaking, so that's important. Great. All right, let's go to this. Okay, so on a typical door, pretty straightforward. You want to make sure that the handle operates properly, the lock works properly. One big thing that the handbook says is you want to make sure that these seals are not worn or bent or anything. Apparently that's really important to the operation of the vehicle. Yeah, so you want to make sure the door is working. Make sure your mirrors are properly mounted and secure, not bent, broken, or cracked. Since this is a passenger vehicle, you want to look at the door. When you tell the guy, once I get in, I would make sure it operates safely. But I am going to look at the lining on the outside. See, it's a little torn right there. That's something I would report to maintenance. So just making sure that the door is properly mounted and secure. It's not bent, broken, or cracked. Moving down the bus, we're going to look at these back tires. So these back tires are what's called duals, like I said earlier, which means there are two tires. So you're essentially going to check the same things as the front tire, but in this case, the important thing is that you're going to make sure the tires are perfectly perpendicular to each other or parallel. if for some reason they were like touching, that would be really, really bad because the tire could potentially obviously blow out. So that's an important thing. One thing about this bus is that on here, the metal cover has been taken off, so you're able to see that lug nut right there. So that's really important. Make sure you point out, this is a lug nut. This is what it would look like if I popped all of these off. Okay. Obviously, as you go down, you're gonna check the reflectors as well. Make sure they're amber in color. All right, it's a little cracked. Actually, let's go up here a little bit. You might have to get under there. Okay, so let's just look through this right here. It's gonna be hard to tell him, but okay, so you can see another leaf spring, but additional to that, in the back over there is the exhaust. So you can kind of, it's really hard to see. So you've got three things that go down the center of the bus. You have the frame, the drive shaft, and the exhaust. The frame is this big guy up here. Obviously you want to make sure the frame is properly mounted, secure, it's not bent, broken, or cracked. You have the exhaust, which is this lighter color metal thing. You want to make sure that there's no visible leaks, like no carbon has been on the outside, because that would be really bad. It could potentially fill up the bus with our passengers. And then behind this exhaust is the drive shaft. The drive shaft is what turns as you're driving to make sure that the axle's turned. All of those you just want to say are properly mounted and secure. They're not bent, broken, or cracked. And you don't have to get on the floor during the test. You can just point them out and say, this is what I'm looking for. Okay, since this is a passenger bus, it's really important to make sure that the emergency exit works. You're going to check the operation of it, make sure the seals are good, properly mounted and secure, not bent, broken, or cracked. You want to make sure all of the lights and reflectors are properly mounted and secure, not bent, broken, or cracked. Backup camera as well. This seat is a little bit janky, so I would report that to maintenance. You can see the fiberglass is breaking a little bit there. Additionally, you can see where the exhaust comes out right there. Make sure that it's not like building up. There's no like leakage on that. If there was leaking right here, it would be a little wary, just something to report to maintenance. So same with the license plate. Okay, important thing on this side, they'll tell you, in my test they said inspect the passenger side, but any things that are unique to the driver's side. This is an example of something that would be unique. Just where the gas goes, you're going to make sure that this latch is properly mounted and secure, it properly locks, that there's a good seal on the gas cap. You might have to inspect this tire, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that pretty much concludes the exterior inspection of the vehicle. The best thing you can refer to is chapter 11, and make sure that you say these things as often as you can. Okay, we're going to stop the video and then we're going to move inside the cab for the in-cab inspection.